about all three great civilizations of the Nile Valley: Egypt, Nubia, and Ethiopia. I will make the case for treating these three civilizations as forming an ideological unity.
In December 1910, John Garstang, a professor from the University of Liverpool, was conducting a dig deep inside Sudan. His team uncovered what looked to be a polished object buried beneath an entrance in one of the many palaces they had discovered in the region. When they fully unearthed it, the object showed a face. The whole world suddenly started to pay attention. It was none other than the face of the most successful Roman emperor, Augustus. To understand this conflict, we journey south along the Nile, beyond Egypt's sandy border, to the ancient kingdom of Kush. Centered at the city of Merowe, in what is now Sudan, Kush is a land of gold and iron, famous for its skilled archers and fierce warriors. In fact, the Egyptians themselves called Nubia Ta Seti, land of the bow, in honor of its deadly marksmen. For centuries, Kushite armies had even conquered and ruled Egypt during the time of the 25th dynasty, and their kings and kandakes, queen mothers, were renowned across Africa and the Mediterranean. Here, unlike in much of the ancient world, women often held the highest positions of power. Amenirenas was one such woman, a kandake of great courage and spirit. Born around 60 BC, Amenirenas came of age in a royal court that valued strength, wisdom, and loyalty to the gods of Nubia. She trained in riding and archery and learned statecraft alongside her husband, King Teretekes. Together, they ruled a prosperous kingdom. Merowe's wealth was built on control of trade between Africa south of the Sahara and the Mediterranean. Ivory, exotic skins, and gold flowed north, while Nubio-Kemetic fine goods, grain, wine, and cotton flowed south. Amenirenas' palace was said to be filled with riches, bricks of gold, iron weapons, and treasures acquired by this exchange. For years, Kush and its northern neighbor, Egypt, coexisted through commerce, if not always peace. But the world changed abruptly in 30 BC. In that year, Cleopatra VII of Egypt and her Roman ally Mark Antony fell to Octavian, Augustus, Caesar, who declared himself emperor and annexed Egypt as a Roman province. The Roman eagle now cast its shadow southward. Augustus installed Roman governors on Egypt's frontiers, men hungry for glory and gold. One such official, Gaius Cornelius Gallus, bragged of subduing revolts in Thebes and even claimed a foothold beyond Egypt, erecting inscriptions on the island of Philae to trumpet his deeds. He and his successor, Aelius Gallus, began to interfere in Nubia, demanding tribute and tightening control over border trade. They stationed troops at Syene, Aswan, and Elephantine Island, the gateway to Kush, and imposed heavy taxes on Kushite merchants and local Nubian communities. Amenirenas watched these developments with growing concern and anger. By 25 BC, Rome's occupation of Lower Nubia, the Dodecaskoinos, the northernmost stretch of Nubia, had dragged on for 5 years. That year, King Teretekes died, and Amenirenas assumed full authority as queen regnant. It was a perilous moment, a foreign superpower at her doorstep, her people burdened by Roman taxes and Roman statues rising on Nubian soil. Yet the queen was not easily intimidated. If anything, the loss of her eye in battle, a scar she bore proudly, only sharpened her vision to see Kush free from Roman yoke. Amenirenas decided it was time to strike. Fortune favored the bold. In 25 BC, news reached Meroe that Aelius Gallus, the Roman prefect, had marched much of his army east on a distant Arabian campaign. Roman garrisons in Egypt were temporarily depleted and vulnerable. Sensing her chance, Amenirenas rallied her allies and vassals. Under her command, some 30,000 Kushite soldiers assembled, an enormous host from the Upper Nile, including iron-armed infantry, fierce cavalry, and regiments of the famed Nubian archers. Notice here that, unlike popular belief, nations inside the continent of Africa were already using iron and, in many cases, steel. Such is the case for Kush. Abdu B. and Gordon showed in their 2004 paper that there was extensive use of iron in the land of Kush as far back as 300 BC. They studied iron artifacts from Armenia West and Toshka West, Lower Nubia, in graves dated early through late Meroitic, approximately 300 BC to 370 AD. Many of the objects are weapons, drawer points, lance heads, harpoon points, plus tools. Seasoned Kushite captains blew elephant tusk trumpets and beat kettle drums to announce the call to arms. Across the villages of Kush, young men like Kanu left their farms and families to answer their queen's summons. Over the following centuries, the heartland of the kingdom of Kush at Meroe would remain unconquered and rose to new heights. As it did so, the local culture slowly came into its own, melding with and superseding the previous Egyptian-dominated one. We see this in the addition of new religious sites and deities, such as the lion god Apetimak, as well as with new styles of art, architecture, government, and language. It was all a fascinating mix that we sadly don't know enough about and can only really begin to scratch the surface on in this video. Suffice to say, the kingdom of Kush and its power have been severely underrepresented in history. By the 1st century BC, it was a power on the rise, ready to march out and expand its reach once more up to the First Cataract and beyond. And it would come head-to-head against another rising regional power, Rome. By the 1st century BC, Rome had invaded Egypt. In the political and civil mayhem that ensued after the death of Caesar and after Pompey fled to Egypt, Mark Antony had aligned himself with the last of the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty. This dynasty had been established a few centuries before, when Alexander had invaded ancient Egypt. The descendant of this Greek general was none other than Queen Cleopatra. To be clear, she was not a native of Africa. One should also note that ancient Egypt as we knew it, the 3,000-year-old civilization that had started in Upper Egypt, was now over. However, the fertile banks of the Nile had now become the food source for the growing Roman Empire, and Mark Antony's plan was to choke Rome by controlling the Grace. Octavian now had two reasons to attack Egypt. One was to avenge his adopted father, Caesar, and the other was to secure the food production line of his empire. So, when the pair lost the Battle of Actium in 31 BC against Octavian, they de facto ceded control of Egypt to the Roman emperor. Octavian soon had prefects Cornelius Gallus and Aelius Gallus extend Roman Egypt to the First Cataract, while exporting many of the treasures and wealth from Egypt to Rome. Even obelisks were taken out of ancient Egypt and put on display in Rome. This happened from the Lower Nile all the way to the First Cataract. Cornelius Gallus, the first governor of Augustan Egypt, would make the first Roman incursions into the shadowy northern Kushite frontier. After subduing a revolt in the south of Egypt, he audaciously crossed the border to lay claim to the Kushite island of Philae, situated in Lower Nubia. With Queen Amenirenas too weak to mount a counterattack, she was forced to concede her territory and accept the authority of the local lord, who had been chosen to look after Roman interests in the region. But the Queen's capitulation was also an astute political move, giving her enough time to prepare a solid defense and eventually an attack of her own. In the meantime, the Romans began to unfairly treat their new subjects, imposing eye-wateringly high taxes on local merchants and even claiming tax rights on communities allied to Kush. With her people desperate for liberation, the Queen started working on manufacturing new weapons and assembling a new army to challenge the new arrivals in the region. And the Kushites were not wrong to do so, because Rome had plans to invade Kush and get to Ethiopia. But they also had plans to invade the western shores of Arabia. However, with the heavily fortified borders between Egypt and Nubia now calm since the Roman invasion, Emperor Augustus concluded that more than enough had been done to hold the Africans back, so he turned his attention to Arabia. Rome took its garrison of 10,000 soldiers out of southern Egypt and sailed across the Red Sea to launch its campaign against Arabia. This is the mistake that the Queen of Kush had planned for. This is why she had ordered her troops to not engage the Romans in any way for a prolonged period of time. Queen Amenirenas, true to the description of a shrewd tactical commander, had intentionally fortified her border with Egypt, and in so doing, effectively deflected the Roman garrison in Egypt. As the Roman Egypt contingent left for Arabia, she already had her freshly equipped troops ready, 30,000 trained Nubian soldiers of the finest caliber, adorned with archers of renowned precision and distance. The Queen, who had been born between 60 and 40 BCE, from a young age had been trained in military martial skills, which were integral to Kushite society, archery in particular, including battle tactics and strategy. And on that day, she would put these skills to good use. With a reduced force in Egypt due to their Arabian campaign, Amenirenas launched a surprise attack in 25 BC on the Roman towns in the region of Aswan. She commanded an outfit of 30,000 men. Alongside her husband, King Terras, Queen Amenirenas' battalions advanced into Egypt through the Nile mudflats, overwhelming all resistance to murder and enslave the local population. Within a short space of time, the queen had taken the entire region of Treacontos, an area that was 200 square miles. She not only retook Philae, but plundered and terrorized the cities of Syene and Elephantine, destroying and defacing the images of Augustus wherever she went. After sacking the cities, she took many of the men prisoners and acquired a lot of loot. There is one item, however, that she was particularly happy to have captured, and that's the head of the Roman Emperor Augustus. A statue of the head of the ruler that she took back to her capital, Meroe. To send a message to Rome, she had the statue buried under the steps of her palace, meaning that anyone who wanted to come see the queen would have to step over the head of the Roman emperor first. The head remained there for centuries until archaeologist John Garand discovered it in 1910. Yes, that same John Garand who was the mentor of George Reisner. Adding insult to injury, the Roman envoys soon found out that the Cushites were led by a woman. This utterly confused them to the point that they thought there must have been some faraway male leader at the helm of this army that was invading Roman Egypt. Rome could not accept such a defeat and quickly changed prefect. The new prefect, Gaius Petronius, wasted no time raising a new army with 10,000 foot soldiers and 800 horsemen. The counterattack was swift, and the better-equipped Romans pushed back the Nubians out of the southern borders of Roman Egypt that they had invaded a year before. Petronius, happy with his results, harbored ambitions of subjugating the entire Nubian realm under the Roman flag. Before this, however, Petronius was adamant to find out more about the Cushite chain of command, for he was still unconvinced that Queen Amenirenas was their true leader. Whilst being interrogated by the Romans, Amanirenas's generals used this to their advantage, telling Petronius that a male chief called Akinidad, the son of the queen, existed, and that he was based in the northern city of Napata. Believing that Napata was the Cushite capital, Petronius marched his tiring men there, only to find out that they had been tricked. Napata was nothing like the illustrious citadel described by the Cushite generals. It had long been deserted. He learned that the real Cushite center was in fact 330 miles south. In his anger, Petronius enslaved the local population and considered his next move. Finding himself 570 miles from the nearest Roman settlement, which was almost as long as the whole length of Egypt, he decided it was best for his weary and spent legions to return back home. And here we see again the strategic genius of the queen. It is one thing to win a battle, but it is another thing entirely to lose a battle and give your opponent a false sense of confidence, only to lure him into unwelcoming terrain, into a trap proper. A trap made of extreme heat, foreign natural threats, scorpions, mosquitoes, and hippos, and then to have to deal with the scorching heat made worse by metallic Roman body armor. As the Romans made their way back to Alexandria, the queen made their life a living nightmare, sending wave upon wave of marauding warriors to assault their exhausted battalions and free the slaves they had taken with them. By 24 BC, Queen Amanirenas had chased the Romans out of Dhaka and liberated her kingdom once and for all, but at a huge personal cost. As well as losing her eye, her son, Akinidad, was slain on the battlefield. Her injuries, physical and emotional, only further fueled her rage. It is worth noting here that the queen, the Kandake herself, participated in hand-to-hand combat in many of these battles, so much so that she lost one eye during one of these encounters. This, however, did not deter her nor diminish her resolve, nor her results. Yet, while Petronius may have recovered Roman honor with this expedition, he had done little to actually weaken the strength of the Kushites, whose lands around Meroe remained untouched. In fact, it seems that their invasion may have actually helped Queen Amenirenas rally the locals to her side. When the Romans, broken and bedraggled, finally reached the frontier, the queen did not stop, and over the next 2 years, Roman Egypt itself would be blighted by constant Kushite raids. In 22 BC, the unrelenting queen sent another army to annihilate the Roman occupiers who were now stationed at the border town of Primus. Their stronghold being located on the top of a hill, they suddenly found themselves surrounded on all sides by Kushite hordes. Soon after, Queen Amenirenas marched back with a new force of many thousands of men to re-establish control of the lands to the north. Word got back to Petronius of her advance, and a race was underway for the fortress of Primus. As history would have it, the Romans got there first, but as you will see, this wasn't such a bad outcome. New troops reinforced the garrison and set about bolstering its fortifications. Their position proved strong enough to warrant a prolonged standoff with the Romans blockaded. In the stalemate, Petronius suggested the queen air her grievances to Augustus himself, who at that very moment was preparing for an assault on Syria on the Greek island of Samos. After years of non-stop combat, the burnt-out Egyptian prefect was ready to broker peace by any means necessary. The Kushites responded. When Petronius offered to escort them to Samos, they accepted, sending envoys in place of their queen, for the acclaimed name Augustus was not worthy of her presence. At the Treaty of Samos in 21 BC, Kushite ambassadors presented Augustus with a quiver of golden arrows and a stern message from their queen that read, "If you want peace, they are a token of her warmth and friendship. If you want war, you will need them." Strabo tells us that Augustus granted them everything they wished for, and even revoked the tributes which had previously been imposed upon the region. These were extremely favorable terms. But why would Rome offer them? Well, it seems that some of this had to do with short-term considerations by Augustus, who wished to conclude peace while otherwise dealing with a delicate situation in neighboring Parthia. There were also more long-term considerations, where Rome realized it would have quite a difficult time exerting control beyond the First Cataract. And given the strength and resolve of the Kushites, and given that Rome could not subdue them, they could prove to be a worthy ally in the region rather than being a constant threat. It is all these calculations that the queen had taken into consideration when deciding not to attack the Roman fort, calculations that would enable the safeguard of her border beyond the First Cataract, a border that the true ancient Egyptians had crossed centuries ago when the Persians and the Greeks after them had come to occupy Kemet. That cataract now served as a veritable gatekeeper of the inner continent, where the artery of Africa itself, the Nile, ran all the way up to modern-day Rwanda. The peace which followed proved prosperous to both, and the kingdom of Kush would rise to new heights as a valuable economic partner in the region. In fact, the cooperation developed to such a degree that when Nero later sent an expedition to find the source of the Nile, the king of Meroe would assist them in their journey, that perhaps led them as far as modern Ethiopia and Uganda. We tend to forget how incredibly similar ancient Egypt and ancient Nubia were, far closer than Rome and ancient Greece ever were. So if we speak of Greco-Roman civilization, then it is more appropriate to call Egypt and Nubia the Nubio-Kemetic civilization complex. Now you understand why Queen Amenirenas is one of our highest tiers on my Patreon and YouTube membership. The truth is that African history has never been lacking in heroes. If anything, those heroes have been so influential that they have tended to be reattributed to other areas of the world who recognize their great deeds. From Hannibal to Hatshepsut to Sundiata to Shaka to Toussaint Louverture, Africans have always been achievers, whether male or female, or even missing one eye. We all have Amenirenas' spirit in our hearts. In this relief shown here, you will recognize the smiting pose often used in Kemet. But here we find it deep in the kingdom of Meroe. Oh, did you know that the smiting pose was also used in Mesoamerica? But that is a story for another day. It is a great shame that we still cannot decipher the Meroitic script. If AI is going to have any usefulness at all, I hope that it is in deciphering this most precious African script. I cannot begin to imagine the stories it would tell. If you want to support the channel, you can use the links on the screen or in the video description. If you like the music we have, use the link below where we have a channel, Without History Vibes, dedicated to history-inspired music, along with historical illustrations.
Thank you. Join us and see how those who are said to be without history birthed civilization itself.